I used to think I had a perfect life. Married for 6 years, stable job, nice home in a quiet neighborhood. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. My spouse was the kind of person people envy, kind, dependable, and always calm. From the outside, we looked like the picture of happiness. And for a while, maybe we were. But something had shifted over the past year. We'd stopped laughing together. Conversations had turned into logistical updates. It wasn't toxic, it was just hollow. A few months ago, my younger brother asked if he could stay with us for a while. He just graduated and was job hunting in our city. I was happy to help. We'd always been close growing up, and I thought maybe some new energy in the house would break up the routine. My spouse was welcoming as always, offering him the guest room and helping him settle in. At first, everything felt refreshingly normal. He brought this lightness into the house, telling stories over dinner, helping with chores, cracking jokes that made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. It wasn't anything inappropriate. He was just being himself. I didn't realize how much I missed that feeling of being seen. My spouse was working longer hours, and even when they were home, their mind was often somewhere else. Meanwhile, my brother was present in a way I didn't expect. One night, we ended up watching an old movie we loved as kids. My spouse had gone to bed early, exhausted from a double shift. It felt like being teenagers again, laughing over the dumbest lines, quoting every scene. I didn't even notice how close we were sitting until the credits rolled. We both reached for the remote at the same time, and our hands touched. It was a small moment, meaningless on the surface. But it lingered. The next morning, everything returned to normal. He was in the kitchen making coffee, acting as if nothing had happened. And maybe nothing had. But I found myself watching him more closely after that. How his voice changed when he talked to me. How quickly he smiled. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was just lonely and assigning meaning to things that didn't matter. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something subtle had shifted between us. A week later, we had dinner together while my spouse was out of town for a work event. It was innocent takeout, the same movie we never finished. But the way he looked at me when I laughed, it made something tighten in my chest. He wasn't supposed to look at me like that. And I wasn't supposed to notice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake next to my spouse, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had started to drift. I wasn't planning anything. I just couldn't stop thinking about what wasn't being said. There was no plan to hurt anyone. But sometimes, the things you don't say out loud are the ones that echo the longest. It started with the way he looked at me, not just casually, but like he was searching for something familiar, something lost. I told myself it was nothing. I was married. He was my younger brother. Not by blood. He was my stepbrother, but it still felt wrong even to notice. Yet, every day it became harder to ignore how easy it was to be around him. He listened. He remembered small things. When he laughed at my jokes or asked how my day went, it felt sincere, unfiltered. Not like the rehearsed concern I got from my spouse lately. He made me feel wanted, even without saying it. There was no touching, no confessions. Just glances that lingered a second too long, casual compliments that weren't quite casual. Once, I caught him staring at me while I folded laundry. He didn't look away. I didn't either. I told myself I should be angry, but I wasn't. The guilt came in waves. I'd avoid him, spend longer hours out, pretend I was too busy. But whenever I walked into the room and he was already there, some part of me lit up. It wasn't just about attention. It was about the silence I'd been drowning in for months. My spouse used to call me during lunch, leave silly notes, bring home my favorite snacks. Lately, we were more like roommates with overlapping schedules. I didn't blame them. Life got heavy. But I missed feeling chosen. One night, he asked me why I seemed distant. I froze. No one had asked me that in so long. I gave a vague answer about work stress. He just nodded and said, "You don't have to lie to me." That sentence stuck with me like a splinter. It was so simple, yet it pierced right through. That was the night everything changed. We didn't do anything. We just sat on the balcony, talking about nothing and everything. He remembered the first time we met, how awkward it was when our parents married. He said I always made him feel like family, even when he didn't know where he belonged. I wanted to cry, not from sadness, but because someone finally said what I'd been needing to hear. After that, there was no going back. I started waking up thinking about him, wondering what shirt he'd wear, whether he'd be home for dinner. The worst part? I stopped thinking about how wrong it was. I just wanted it. Not him, specifically, but what he gave me. The feeling of being seen. Being enough. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my best friend. I couldn't. Saying it out loud would make it real. I convinced myself it was just emotional. A phase. A harmless distraction. But I knew better. Emotional lines, once crossed, are harder to erase than physical ones. I kept telling myself I had control, that it would never go further, that I would stop it before it became something I couldn't take back. I was lying. The night it happened, I didn't expect anything. My spouse had gone on a weekend retreat with colleagues, something work-related, something I barely paid attention to. I stayed home. My brother didn't have plans either. We ended up ordering dinner, falling back into our now familiar rhythm of inside jokes, casual conversations, and knowing glances we both tried not to hold for too long. But the space between us felt different. Heavy, like something was about to give. I had wine. He did too. Not much, just enough to soften the edges of whatever restraint we were still holding on to. We started talking about things we'd never said, about how lonely we both felt. How strange it was to live in the same house as someone you loved but felt completely disconnected from. How easy it was to pretend, to keep moving through routines that made everything look fine from the outside. I wasn't looking for sympathy, but his eyes didn't carry judgment, only understanding. I don't remember the exact moment our words stopped and the silence started pulsing. It was a blur. I looked at him too long. He didn't look away. I should have stood up, walked out, called someone, anyone. But I didn't. I leaned in. Or maybe he did. Our lips met, and in that instant, all the guilt vanished. There was only hunger, relief, something dark and forbidden that felt terrifyingly right. We crossed a line I swore I never would. It was brief. It was desperate. But it happened. And as soon as it was over, reality snapped back into place like a whip. My heart was racing. My thoughts spiraled. I couldn't believe what I'd done. I didn't even look at him. I just stood there, half-dressed, frozen in my own shame. Then the door opened. My younger brother, my actual younger brother, walked in. He'd come home early from a party. I hadn't even heard the front door. The look on his face was pure disbelief, horror. He didn't say a word. He just stared at us, mouth slightly open, like he couldn't process what he was seeing. I scrambled to fix myself, to say something, but there were no words. Nothing could make it less awful. He turned and walked out without saying a thing. The silence he left behind was louder than anything. My stepbrother just stood there, stunned. And I was already drowning in panic. I knew it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. I'd crossed every line, broken every vow, and now someone else knew. Someone who couldn't unsee it. Someone who would never look at me the same way again. I stood alone in that room, feeling stripped down to the worst version of myself. And for the first time since this spiral started, I felt something stronger than desire. I felt shame. Not the subtle kind that creeps in quietly. The kind that slams into your chest and stays there. Because now it was real. Now it couldn't be undone. The next morning was unbearable. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, replaying everything in my head, trying to imagine a way to erase it. There wasn't one. I heard my brother leave before sunrise, quietly, like he couldn't stand to be in the same space. He didn't even knock on my door. He just left. My stepbrother avoided me too. The energy had shifted completely. Whatever existed between us the night before had evaporated, leaving only silence and tension thick enough to choke on. By noon, I got the call I'd been dreading. My spouse's voice was calm, but different. Measured. They asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" I felt my stomach drop. I asked why. They said my brother had called. He didn't give details, just told them they needed to talk to me. Urgently. That was all it took. My spouse came home early, and the moment they saw me, it was over. They knew. I didn't deny it. I couldn't. I just stood there, eyes down, waiting for the fallout to hit. And it did, just not in the way I expected. There wasn't screaming. No rage. Just silence. A quiet that felt like a wall slamming down between us. They asked me how long it had been going on. I told them it wasn't an affair. It happened once. I tried to explain, to give context, but the words sounded pathetic. I could see the pain in their eyes, not just from what I did, but from the betrayal coming from two people they trusted. They left that night, took a bag, and didn't say where they were going. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. My stepbrother packed and left the next morning. No goodbye. Just a note on the counter. Sorry. That was all. My brother blocked me. I tried texting, calling, even emailing once. Nothing. The damage was complete, immediate, and impossible to undo. I sat alone in that house for the next week, surrounded by reminders of everything I'd just destroyed. The framed photos on the wall, the pair of slippers at the door, the empty coffee mug by the sink. Everything suddenly felt like evidence, not of a crime, but of a life I didn't deserve anymore. Eventually, my spouse called. They didn't want to talk about fixing anything. Just logistics, bank accounts, the lease, who would take what. They didn't yell or blame. That hurt more than if they had. It meant they were already done, that there was no fight left in them. And I couldn't blame them. Now, weeks later, I still wake up expecting a knock at the door. Some part of me thinks maybe my brother will show up, ready to talk. Or that my spouse will come back, even just to scream at me. But they don't. No one does. That's the part no one warns you about. Not the guilt. Not the shame. The silence. The way it stretches out, day after day, reminding you that when trust is broken, sometimes it doesn't get rebuilt. Sometimes you just live with the ruins.